Josh is a local boy, grew up in the county. He's from the city of Turlock. My friends in the South County say you don't call them Turlockers, you call them Turlovians. And so he grew up in Turlock, but he went to Modesto High, where I taught for 33 years. So I know he got a good education there. And then he went to Stanford, not a bad university. And then he went to Harvard for business school to do his master's in business. And in between, he did volunteer work in East Africa. And then he did something wonderful. He came back home. Because as somebody who taught high school seniors for many, many years, I waved goodbye to somebody and walked off campus, and they never came back. And that's fine, but it's very, very nice to have our best and brightest come home to help the home team again. So we're really appreciative to see people like Josh back in the community and active. And as somebody who's over 70, I have to say it's also very nice to see younger people picking up the baton. A lot of us geezers, we thought we'd won all the battles during civil rights and the anti-war movement and so on. The truth is you have to fight those battles every generation. You can't ever stop. And so more than happy to hand the baton off, especially to somebody as capable as Josh, who's as intelligent and articulate and committed to the people of Stanislaus County as Josh is. So enough. Turn it over to Josh.
Thank you. Here's for Jim and Suzanne. Thank you guys so much for pulling this together. I thought I'd chat a little bit about my background. I know some folks have heard it before, but I want to make sure we put all on the same page. Talk a little bit about the issues that I'm hearing as I'm knocking on doors and talking to people, and my kind of response and what the biggest challenges I think this district is facing are. And then we can just have a broad conversation, whatever issues we want to talk about. I know some folks have some prepared for their high school classes, which is exciting. Whatever we want to talk about, we can kind of take it there. First, a little bit of my background. I know this community real well. I'm a 5th-generation resident. My great-grandfather came out on a wagon train in 1850, came 2,000 miles in search of gold, and then stopped 50 miles short to become a peach farmer. It always gets one laugh. We got one. A peach farmer in Manteca, not too far away. But I grew up in Turlock, as Jim said, went through the public school system, graduated from Modesto High. Any Modesto High alums? Couple? Great. Yeah, go Panthers. And then got a scholarship right from here, from Modesto Rotary Club and the American Legion, to go off to Stanford, go off to Harvard Business School, and spent my career working in business. I did a lot of things, but most of what I did was help small businesses grow and create jobs. My big success story in that regard was a company called Blue Apron. Does meal kits in a box, helps you cook at home. Got it from 2 guys and a dog in a garage to now 1,000 employees, 1 million customers all across the country. Sources all their nuts and fruits from right here and actually creates a lot of jobs in our own community. And one of the things I think a lot about is how do we create the next kind of agricultural technology companies in an area like the Central Valley where 20% of our jobs come from ag. And now I teach at Modesto Junior College, trying to do the exact same thing, teaching people how to write business plans, build companies, and grow, which means I talk a lot about taco trucks, auto body repair shops, and most of all marijuana dispensaries, which are really popular among my students these days. It's a very popular thing among 20-something folks that want to build new businesses here in Modesto, which is great. I never thought I would be doing politics. I was really enjoying business. I love teaching. I never thought I'd be here. But the reason I am is because I see a category of issues and challenges that I think our current political leadership is deeply misrepresenting us on, right? Healthcare, immigration, and jobs are probably the biggest. Healthcare is the easiest one to think about, and it's very personal to me. This is a district where nearly 50% of us are on Medicaid. Nearly 50%. We've all seen the billboards going on 99, nearly 50% of this district on Medicaid. My younger brother would have lost health insurance because of the repeal of the Affordable Care Act that Jeff Denham voted for, right? My brother David, many of you have seen the ad. He was born 10 weeks premature. He was less than 2 pounds when he was first born. I couldn't even hold him when I saw him at doctors. He had all these tubes coming out of him. And when he came out of doctors for the last time, he had a health care bill that was 104 pages long, right? 104 pages. Luckily, we had the insurance to take care of it. Now he's healthy. He's actually knocking on doors constantly in Turlock, making sure we get that word out. But it's a very personal thing when I think that my younger brother would have been without insurance till he's 65 and on Medicare because of Jeff Denham's vote to repeal the Affordable Care Act. And it's not a rare story. There's 100,000 people in this district in the exact same boat. And that got me up in arms, that got me frustrated, and that made me feel like I had to get in and see what I could do to fix it. But it's not just healthcare. We have a range of issues, right? I mean, you have to be blind going through the Central Valley to not see that the economic and social fabric of our community is based on immigration, right? This is a district where immigrants are our lifeblood. One of the volunteers on our campaign, a young woman who works 2 part-time jobs. She's a student at MJC. She is living the American dream, right? She is working hard and trying to get ahead. By any metric, you would look at this young woman and think, this is somebody we want to be a part of our community. We want to be strengthening bonds. And yet, her DACA protection from deportation expired in October, and any day she could be getting a knock on her door telling her she's no longer welcome in our community. Those are the stakes. And yes, Jeff Denham talks a great game on immigration. He says all the right things back here. Then he goes back to D.C., and he votes against comprehensive immigration reform. The 2 votes there have been to push a Clean Dream Act forward, he's voted no on both of them. He's got a record that is deeply distinctive from what his rhetoric back here is. He tells us what we want to hear and then does nothing else. But I don't think we win elections, and I don't think we should win elections just by talking about those contrast messages. I think we have to present a positive vision. What can we do differently in a valley like this one, which has some real needs, right? Let's recognize that we have an unemployment rate twice the national average. Let's recognize that 80% of the kids in our school districts are on free or reduced lunch. We have challenges that we could be doing a lot better on. How do we solve them? I think a lot about the Tri-Valley Growers Cannery. And if you heard me talk about it all the time, it had, at one point, 10,000 jobs, produced 50% of all the canned peaches in the entire country. If you ever had a syrupy canned peach in your kid's school lunch, chances are it came from right here in Modesto, no matter where you live. That cannery today has 2,000 jobs in peak season, right? 80% of those jobs have been automated or outsourced in the last couple of decades. And they announced about 2 months ago that it's going to be closing for good. We're going to lose those jobs permanently in a community like ours. And that's a story that's not just contained to Modesto. We see it in Ohio. We see it in West Virginia. This is the economic reality that we're going through right now. And what can we do about it? I see 2 broad options. One option is we can blame immigrants. We could start trade wars with China. We can hope that this trickle-down economic vision might finally work. I don't think that's right. I don't think most folks in this room, most folks in this district think that that's the right way to actually confront some of the core economic realities that we have. Or we have a second option. We can actually invest in districts like this one. We can invest in education. We can invest in infrastructure. I know that girl. We can actually see what we can do to help fix a district that really has some needs. There are 57 bridges that have a failing grade in Stanislaus County, a failing grade by the American Corps of Civil Engineers. Think of what we could do if we took $1.5 trillion that was added to the debt last year and actually put that money in an area where we actually have real infrastructure problems, where a lot of folks commute to the Bay Area every day, and we don't have the type of transportation infrastructure to accommodate that. Think of what we could do if we could actually put that money in education, right? There's programs in this district at Patterson High, I was at the other day, takes 100 kids at risk of dropping out every year. Teaches them how to install solar panels, how to drive a forklift, how to operate a robot. It's a hugely successful program. Gets people jobs at $20 an hour the day after they graduate, and yet part of that program is federally funded and gets zeroed out in the same budget that made room for yet more corporate tax cuts that don't really benefit folks in this neck of the woods. And that's the stakes, right? Universal health care. Immigration reform for real, not just cheap talk about it. And more jobs and focused on education and infrastructure in an area like ours that really need it. That's our platform, and that's what we're fighting for. We've come a long way. We've now got 750 volunteers across the district, which is great. We did a huge canvas in Tracy this afternoon. There's people knocking on doors in Modesto now. Hopefully, everyone raise your hand if you've gotten at least one flyer from the campaign. Great. That's fantastic. That's what a momentum looks like. But there's 32 days until an election. 32 days. That's not a lot of time. And there's still a vast array of voters who are, at best undecided, and at worst, don't even know there's an election coming up. That's what we have got to address. I believe that the facts are in our favor. Once people hear the facts, right? Once people hear where Jeff Denham has voted on all of these issues, they're totally with us. The challenge is making sure that we pierce through that rhetoric and we say, yes, This is a guy who a year ago stood in front of a town hall meeting in Denair and said he would not vote to repeal protections from pre-existing conditions, and then 2 weeks later he did. This is somebody who says a lot of great things about immigration and then does the exact opposite. We got to make that message be known. And that's where I need the help of everybody in this room. What can you do? A couple things, 3 things. 1, this should be easy. Tell everybody you know, just like Suzanne and Jim and Vicky. There are so many folks that just don't know the core issues, that just don't know what we're trying to stand for. I need your help. If everybody in this room can just think of 3 people that need to know about this election and what the standards are, make it personal and tell folks. Second, you can help us canvass. You can help us knock on doors. You can help us organize house parties. Anytime there is a house party with more than 1 person and a dog, maybe just the dog, I will be there. The challenge is making sure that we just get that message out there, and we need your help to knock on those doors and to make sure we're helping folks. And then third, if you want to, you can give us some money. It does take money to run campaigns. Jeff Denham, 70% of the money he raises comes from corporate PACs and special interests. That's who he's working for. I'm working for you. We have said no to every corporate check. Every dollar we've raised has come from individuals, and that's why we're running, I think, a grassroots campaign that is the example that I would like to set for what campaign finance should be. And that's what one of the things I would hope to accomplish is actually pushing that forward, to make that a requirement for all our members of Congress, because I think we know who Jeff Denham is actually working for, because those are the people that are signing his checks. We have seen, I'll close with this, we have seen what Democratic enthusiasm can do all across the country, right? We saw Connor Lamb win a special election in Pennsylvania. We saw a great election in Virginia. We saw a Democrat win in Alabama. Who expected a Democrat to win in Alabama? That is amazing. And it's only happening because of small groups of folks and rooms like this one all across the country, right? People banding together. 90% of our volunteers have never gotten involved in a campaign before. That is thrilling. Now what we need to do is we need to make sure we channel that energy, that enthusiasm, make sure it goes for another 32 days and then for another 5 months, all the way to November, and make sure we get that message out there. So thank you so much. That's my platform, that's what I'm doing, and that's what I need your help for. But with that, happy to take questions around any of that or other issues people want to think about. Thank you guys so much for being here. Thank you. Who wants to kick it off? Let's start with one of our students.
Okay, it says, how agricultural friendly...
Say your name. Say your
name.
name.
My name is Alex Stewart. I'm a sophomore at Grigori. How agricultural friendly are your views on environmental regulations?
Yeah, there's a lot of ways to take that answer. The easiest one to probably think about, the biggest environmental problem we have in this district, is water. We went through 7 years of drought, followed by 1 year of intense flooding, right? Modesto flooded. The stance that I take on that, I don't really agree that there's a clear trade-off here between environment and farmers. I think when you think about an issue like water, in order to make sure that the Central Valley still exists, is still thriving another 100, 200 years in the future, we need water. Both Republicans and Democrats drink water. That is a core problem, right? What do we do about it? I'll describe the policies that I think we should do, and you can decide what you think about them. First, we need more water efficiency. Right now, most farmers don't necessarily have drip irrigation systems. If you go to a place like Israel, everybody has micro irrigation systems that use a lot less water. We need to do tax deductions for micro irrigation because it's good for the environment and it's good for farmers. Second, we need more recycling programs and new technology, right? If you look at some of the groundwater depletion that's happened in this neck of the woods, you'll see some of our farms that have gone down a couple inches over the last couple years because we're depleting all the groundwater and the fossilized aquifers underneath. We got to recycle more water down in there and make sure we're putting more water in. And we got to make sure we stop things like the Delta tunnels, which are the fastest way to hamstring a district like ours, is to take all of our water in Northern California and ship it down to Southern California. That would be the worst thing to happen to California and especially to the Central Valley. And then third, we need more storage, right? I mean, I think of this like Joseph in the time of the pharaohs, when times are good and you're getting a lot of water, you should be storing that water instead of making sure that runoff goes off to the ocean. So when Modesto floods, the next time it doesn't actually flood, we hold that in a place like the Sites Reservoir, which is actually fairly environmentally friendly. It's not a dam, it's a floodplain reservoir to make sure we can store water in times of good. That kind of 3-ingredient set of policies, I don't think of it as Republican or Democrat. I don't think of it in terms of environment or farmer. I think of it in terms of being a strong advocate for what the Central Valley needs. And that's what I'm going to try to do. money in politics is one of the worst things that can happen to a democracy, right? I think Citizens United, which allowed unfettered access from large corporations to funnel money into areas like this. I mean, Jeff Denham is on a list for the Koch brothers of their 5 or 6 most vulnerable people in the entire country. They call it their Patriot program, which I think is amazing branding, although inaccurate. We need to redefine patriotism to mean standing up for communities like ours, not for what necessarily they're trying to do. But that's the result, right? We see the policies. We see a corporate tax cut that benefited essentially no one in a district like this one, only helped a handful of donors. Why did the reason that happened? I believe it happened because most of the political party was getting a whole lot of money from those large corporations. I think that was one part of it. I think they also ideologically believed in it. So I think we see real policy decisions being made because of the terrible money that is in our political system. That's the problem. The solution, how do we fix it? I think we need to do a constitutional amendment to repeal Citizens United. No dark money in politics, period. I think we should go farther than that. I think we should make sure that individual candidates, like Jeff Denham, or like me, I already act like I am, like I should be in this law, although I think everybody should be subject to it. No corporate PAC money in elections, period, right? I mean, when that's 70% of the campaign coffers of somebody like Jeff Denham, who's raised nearly $3 million so far in this election cycle alone, we see the results of that. We need to make sure that we have a set of legislation that makes sure people are focused on money coming from individuals and not from those large corporations. That's what I want to do to fix it, because I agree with you. It's a big problem, and it's at the root of a lot of the policy issues that we're seeing take place. Jim? There are so many things that we could be doing. Public financing is another thing. I think that's probably it probably is going to be easier to ban corporate money than to go all the way to public financing. But if we could go all that way, fantastic. The core problem that we have is the system the way it's set up now. People win based on navigating that system well, and then once they get into office, they don't want to change it because the rules are already benefiting the people who are already getting elected into it. That means that the change has to come in 2 ways. One, it has to come up by electing folks who are not subject, who are trying not to be subject to those current rules, people like me that have already said no to corporate PAC money. And second, ultimately, if it's not our legislators who want to take a leadership on this issue, it's got to be something that people really care about, right? And it's got to be driven by the grassroots. And that's the way that we create enough momentum around an idea that I think really needs to happen, because it's at the root of a lot of the core issues that we're seeing. The answer is I would be up for any of them. I would support absolutely anything to reform our current system, right? Whether that's passing a constitutional amendment, whether that's passing a bill that just says no corporate PAC money in legislations, whether that's going all the way to public financing. I honestly, I support all of it. I think the worst is the corporate money. That to me rubs me the wrong way because I think we see the results of it. We literally saw in October a corporate tax cut that didn't do a lot to help communities like ours, and I think that's largely because of the vast outsized influence of these corporations that come in. That's probably the lowest hanging fruit. But if another area ends up getting traction, I'll sign on to that as well. What I want to do is have a democracy, like a real democracy, where the same people that are casting their votes are the same people that are actually contributing to candidates that they believe in. That is a system that works pretty well. That's not the system that we have today, and we need to get back to it. I think we're in a moment where democracy is under attack across the world. We're seeing countries like Turkey. I don't know how many folks really are following the internal politics of the country of Turkey, but basically you have a country that used to be very, very democratic, inching towards autocracy. We've seen in Russia the exact same thing, right? We've seen a country that used to be entirely autocratic, then had a shining brief moment of democracy, and now under Putin has largely moved away from that. And we have a political leadership in our own country who, under Trump is celebrating that, right? I mean, if you ask Trump who are the leaders he admires, it's a list of autocrats, right? It's a list of people like Erdogan in Turkey or Putin in Russia, which, he may have other reasons for really supporting. But that's the case, right? I mean, the case is democracy is under attack all across the country. What do we do about it? I'm trying to figure this out just as much as everybody else is. I want to think about what we can do at home in America. I don't think we're anywhere close to being, the next Turkey or the next Russia, but I do think we have democratic institutions here that in some places are standing up and in some places aren't. To give you one example of something that I'm really frustrated in that ties directly to what we see here, it's what Devin Nunes has done on the Intelligence Committee in the House, right? You see somebody who should be a watchdog ending up being a lapdog, right? Somebody who is literally just signing his name on everything that Trump wants him to do. What can we do about that, right? Well, we can vote Devin Nunes out, and absolutely we should do whatever we can to do that. But even more, what can people in this district do? I had a chance to sit down with Congressman Adam Schiff, the congressman from Los Angeles, who's been very supportive of what we're doing out here. And he said, look, even if we don't flip the Senate, even if it's still Republican control, obviously we can't really do much about the presidency. It's going to be Republican for the next year. But imagine what happens if we flip 23 seats. And all of a sudden, instead of Devin Nunes in charge of the Intelligence Committee, it's Adam Schiff. Somebody who I think most folks, when they look at him, see somebody who is a career prosecutor, who isn't necessarily deeply partisan, but who actually looks for truth, and we give that person subpoena power, right? We can actually do a lot to fix our democracy if we create real accountability in our federal government, and we put people in charge who actually want to focus on accountability instead of just scoring more partisan political points. We can get a significant amount of the way there. We can get almost 5% of the way there just by winning in this district. And that's why this race is so important, because it has so many outcomes, not just for our own community, but for what's happening in our country as a whole. That was a long answer, but you asked me about democracy across the globe. It was a complicated one. Sure. What is your position on the Electoral College? A lot of really big democratic institutional questions. I don't like the Electoral College. I think it's an archaic institution that no longer really pushes us in the way that it should be. I believe in one person, one vote. And I think the Electoral College has not really helped us out there. We certainly see the implications here in California, right? We don't get nearly the attention in California on most issues. We don't get nearly the amount of money. And one of the reasons for that is we're not a swing state. We don't have the presidential candidates coming through and talking to us all the time like Florida or Pennsylvania or Ohio do. I think it's a system that leaves a lot of folks disenfranchised. I think it's a system that should go away. How do we do that as a more complicated thing? Obviously, a constitutional amendment to do it would be the right way. There's also approaches where individual states do what they say they would sign on to whoever wins the popular vote. There's a risk that could just really hurt Democrats if a lot of Democratic states turn on to that and a lot of Republican states don't. So it kind of has to happen at the same time. But if we were to do that, I think it would make a lot of sense. And that, if California would cast its electoral votes and Texas would cast their electoral votes for whoever wins the popular vote, you would see a lot more campaigning happen in California and Texas because that's where the votes are, as opposed to just in the swing states where it could be changed by 70,000 people. I don't think that's the largest issue with disenfranchisement, but I think that's one of the things that we could do to actually try to fix a set of democratic institutions that maybe made sense in the 1700s, but don't make a ton of sense today.
Gerrymandered districts. What would your conversation with others be about that?
It's not a huge problem in California, thankfully, right? We have districts that are decided upon by a third party, which makes a lot of sense. And that's why we have districts just like the one where we're in, which if you look at our district, we are a microcosm of the country, right? We've got, roughly speaking, 50% Republican, 50% Democrat. We are what most districts should be like if they were cut correctly. And that leads to a good, honest discussion. That leads towards leaders that aren't necessarily beholden 100% towards one political party or the other, but represent the districts of the community. Or it should. One of the reasons of my frustrations is I think Jeff Denham has basically signed on to his political party 100% as opposed to representing the district's interest of his district. But this is something that should be able to self-correct in an election like this one. We can do a lot to stop gerrymandering, right? States like Pennsylvania, there's already challenges going through the court system that have overturned, and so there's a lot of gerrymandering that's being fixed as we speak in Pennsylvania. North Carolina is doing a set of legal challenges as well. The legal system seems to be working out well, but I would support a federal law that would put all division of congressional districts and other districts in the hands of an independent third party, be that independent commission, be that a set of judges, somebody that's not a set of partisan policymakers, right? Because look, I mean, this is an issue where we can cast aspersions on both sides. If Democrats can do it, they will gerrymander. If Republicans can do it, they can gerrymander, right? Now, what's happened is in most states, the Republicans control more state legislators, so they're doing more. But this is a problem that we have to solve by making sure that these decisions go in the hand of somebody who is not actually trying to make these weird dragon-headed districts that don't make any sense on paper, but are meant only to sponsor a handful of seats. So it's something we got to fix. I talk about what we can do to invest in education in Central Valley students. And what does that mean, right? Most of the dollars going in our education system happen from state and local, but I think that the federal government can serve as a catalyst towards a couple different areas. I'll talk about two programs that I think make a lot of sense. One is STEM and the other is apprenticeship programs that I would like to move towards. So STEM, there are high schools in California where there's 35 computer science classes. Then there's places like Modesto High, where I went to school, where Jim taught, which has barely the same set of resources, right? We know what's happening with, the advances in technology, the need for more STEM education and computer science, and yet areas like ours are not getting our fair share of resources as school districts like Palo Alto or Mountain View or others outside of California, even the public schools, right? There was an Obama-era initiative to put computer science in rural high schools that would have hugely helped out a district like ours, as well as districts all across the country. And yet, the Trump administration has cut the budget for that program by 95%, right? Just because it had the word Obama in it. What would I do? That should be a bipartisan program because a lot of rural districts are Republican, just as much as rural districts are sometimes Democratic. I would focus on trying to reach across the aisle and create a program where we actually bring that back up. Maybe we rebrand it. Maybe we call it, Trump's computer science program. I don't really care what we call it. I just want to make sure that we get the resources to school districts like ours that really need that help to train teachers, to get equipment, and to make sure that our students are prepared for what we know is going to happen. That's one. The second is apprenticeship programs, right? We used to have great shop programs, right, where they would train folks and then folks would graduate and they'd go work in an auto shop and they'd have the skills that were necessary. We've moved away from that a little bit. We still have some great programs like FFA is a good example, but we can do a lot better. 84% of the residents in this district don't have a college degree. 84% of adults in our district don't have a college degree. I believe we should move more folks to a college degree. I teach at Modesto Junior College. It's clearly my incentive to move more folks towards college. We also need to create careers outside of that, right? We got to make sure that folks, that employers are coming into our school districts and saying, look, if you train 50 people who can install solar panels, then Solar City will hire those people the day after they graduate when they have that set of skills at $22 an hour. Those are the sorts of programs that exist in a handful of our high schools. It exists a little bit in Ceres, a little bit in Patterson. I want to blow it up. I want to make sure that this is a program that we do all across our community and across the rest of the country because we need more pathways to careers and to futures where you can actually work hard and get ahead instead of graduate and look around and not necessarily have a next step ahead of you. That's something that we can take a real leadership attitude towards. Your question is, for folks that maybe didn't hear it, what can we do to push more people in trades? This is a huge issue. 84% of the adults in our district don't have a college degree. 84%. We should be pushing more folks to college. That's great, but that's not going to work for everybody, right? We can do a lot more. So there are programs that are already being successful, right? What I want to do is I want to take those programs and make sure everybody has an opportunity. I can't tell you how frustrating it is for me to go to an employer, for me to go to Foster Farms. I sat down with the folks at Foster Farms a little while ago, and they say, it's really hard for us to find, skilled people without a college degree to do accounting. And then I go to some of our high schools, and the high school kids graduate, and they say, well, I can't get a job here. I got to go to Oakland or Berkeley to get something. And I say, this doesn't make any sense. Why don't we find a way to put these two things together where Foster Farms, Gallo already has a program that does some great stuff with this, and we go directly into our school systems and we make a promise to our kids, and we say if you graduate from this program, you don't have to take a job. You could go to a four-year school if you want to, but you have a guarantee at a good living wage job that is going to, whether it's driving a forklift. In a manufacturing environment, whether that's installing solar panels, whether or not that's doing accounting that doesn't require a college degree. There's a lot of things that we could be doing for those kids, and we can make a real promise to them. We can say there will be a job here at the end if you get X amount of a GPA and so forth. We just need to be able to have the infrastructure to build those sorts of programs because we need it right here. Yes, ma'am. Good question. For folks that didn't hear it, what is my position on privatization or voucher programs, as maybe some folks want to think about it? I think they're terrible, right? I mean, the best example of this is Secretary Betsy DeVos's actual example, which happened in the state of Michigan. So for folks who didn't follow it very closely, the state of Michigan used to have pretty good educational outcomes, 25th in the country in education and math and science. And then Betsy DeVos spent an enormous amount of money trying to privatize their entire system, and they did. They moved towards for-profit schools with absolutely no restrictions. And what happened? You saw a handful of folks get really rich, and then you saw a lot of the educational outcomes absolutely plummet. Right now, today, Michigan is in the 40s of states in terms of educational outcomes. And I think that's very clearly because they privatized a lot of their school systems. I think it's probably one of the worst things that we could do to our school system is try to take money away and put it into for-profit systems where the interests of the student aren't first and foremost, right? I mean, if you're creating a for-profit school and all you want to do is make a lot of money, it's not gonna work. We also see this already happening in higher education, where a lot of the higher education institutions, kind of the University of Phoenix, they spend a ton of money on advertising. They get a lot of people, often folks coming back on the GI Bill, and they don't actually create good educational outcomes. I don't think for-profit schools have a good record for it, and I don't think we should allow them in any way. Question for folks that didn't hear: what are we going to do about fake news, alternative facts? And the fact, this really hurts us because if we can't agree on a common set of facts, then we can't lead to a consensus of what we actually need to do to fix it. If one person thinks that a problem that crime is skyrocketing and another person thinks the crime isn't, well then you're not going to lead to the same sort of policy outcome if you don't agree on what is actually happening, which you can see. This is a really complicated problem with a lot of stuff going on. I'll give you one thing that I really think we can do, which is a lot of this fake news is being propagated online through Twitter and Facebook and our institutions like that. That's why we saw Mark Zuckerberg come into DC and do a bunch of panels. The attitude of these platforms has been that they don't have any responsibility for what actually occurs on them. Whatever anybody wants to post, if somebody else wants to like it, if somebody else wants to support it, that's fine. They've done a little bit to curb hate speech. They've done a little bit to kind of curb some of the most egregious things, but they need to do a lot more. I think these companies need to reimagine themselves as media companies as opposed to platforms which have no responsibility, and we need to regulate them. We need to say, if there is a story that is not true, that is going on Facebook, not only can you hold the underlying, media company that posted that story or that created that story responsible, you can hold Facebook responsible for not actually taking it out. One of the things I want to do is make sure that there's a positive, a checkbox for institutions that actually hold high news standards, right? So right now, there's so many different news outlets that you see on Facebook or Twitter, you don't know what to trust. There should be a trust symbol that we should have, and we should be holding these platforms accountable for the news that they actually operate. If we don't, then everybody's going to continue to fractionalize their news intake, and we won't actually be able to agree on a common set of standards. Yeah. I think what we're seeing happen now is there's an upshot in citizen journalists, right? The rise of blogs, the rise of Facebook, a lot of this stuff is being written by individuals who don't necessarily have a lot of journalistic training. That's just the way it is. I think we can accommodate that, we can recognize it, but we still need to make sure it holds higher standards of truth and accountability. And the way we do that is we're not going to be able to say, well, Samantha wrote something that's a lie, Samantha should be held accountable. We have to say, Facebook, you are not allowed to post things by people that don't satisfy, you're not allowed to support things and to actually propagate things that don't hold basic standards of journalistic integrity and accountability, right? That's we have to hold the big guys responsible, not just the little guys, because the fact is while we should be making sure people go to journalism school, or we should make sure that the free press continues to exist, there's been a dispersion of viewpoints, right? There's now so many different people. Anybody with a Twitter account can post whatever they want. We saw that with Donald Trump. He continues to post whatever he wants. What we should do is we should actually make sure that Twitter and Facebook hold those people accountable instead of just the individuals, because that's like whack-a-mole. We're never going to be able to get to the truth with that. Yeah, one question back here. Let me give you one example. Let me give you one real concrete example. The number one fake news story of 2016 was the Pope endorsing Donald Trump. right? It wasn't true. The Pope did not endorse Donald Trump, but it was written by a small kind of fake news, Breitbart-like site. And then it was posted on Facebook, and it went viral. Tons of people were sharing it, and it was really big news. What do I think we should do about that? Well, currently our status is we go to that news publisher, and we can, and we can actually tell those people that that what they did was wrong, and it didn't hold accountability standards, and that. What I am suggesting is we go the extra mile, and we also say, Facebook, look, a huge percentage of people on your platform were seeing this news. You are not held blameless, right? Obviously, there should be some, period of time. It's hard. It is like whack-a-mole, making sure that you counter every single piece of mistruth. But if there is a piece of fake news, like the Pope endorsing Donald Trump, which is not true, Facebook should not be held blameless. They should actually be held to account for lies that are going on their platform that millions of people are seeing because of Facebook. Right? And so we have to be able to, walk and chew gum at the same time.
I just think that's the power of social media in general.
It's the power.
You can put anything on social media and it can become a giant controversial topic, whether it's real or not.
Yes.
Social media is just such a powerful thing in this generation that
It is an amplifier. And what we need to do is we need to make sure that it's not amplifying the bad stuff.
it's being utilized.
It's the largest political protest in Turlock City history, right? Because of the power of social media, because these 16-year-old kids saw what happened in Parkland, they saw what happened. That should give us some hope and faith for an optimism for what's going on. Yeah, Roland.
I don't argue with anything that's been said about social media, but the history, I follow the news pretty well. The history of the meanness in the news, the person to blame is Murdoch, the guy who owns Fox News. He really injected, because he found that this heightened type of discourse was good for his bottom line. This guy is going to continue to do that as long as he's alive. Hopefully, he's 84. And we won't have to deal with him much longer, because I think his sons are a little bit more civilized.
Yeah. And ultimately, what we can do is we can set a counterexample that I think is really powerful. All right, one more question. Let's talk about gun control real quick. We have seen a real movement over the last couple months that I think is unbelievably exciting around finally trying to confront this issue and trying to acknowledge that thoughts and prayers are no longer enough. We have all been disgusted at the number of times we have to wake up in the morning, see the headlines of the news, and think, oh my gosh, how could this have happened again? There's a lot we can do about it. Let's first talk about Jeff Denham, what he's done, which is not just nothing, but actually worse than nothing. He's rolled back a lot of gun control measures, right? He's pushing for concealed carry reciprocity, which basically gives us the gun control laws of the state of Nevada right next door. And he's taken $60,000 from the NRA, so it kind of comes full loop into what we're talking about when we're talking about money in politics. He's taken tens of thousands of dollars from them. It's no surprise where he's voted. What I want to do, we already have a set of successful gun laws that already exist in California. We have AR-15s are not allowed here. You can't buy a weapon of war in the state of California. We have 10-day waiting periods, which are enormously important for the silent epidemic of gun suicides. 20,000 people a year die in gun suicides, which is more than actually die in some of these mass atrocities. And we have universal background checks. All three of those things we already have here in California, and no surprise, they work. They have cut down gun deaths by over 60% over the last 25 years that we've had those protections in place. What I want to do is make sure that we take what already exists in California and make sure it exists in all the rest of the country, right? So, in Nevada, and in Parkland, Florida, and all these other states where they don't have nearly the same protections, we make that the law of the land everywhere else. And we can do that, and I can still stand in front of an NRA supporter here in this district and say, look, I want everybody else to be subject to the same laws that you are already living by right here in our district. Because we know they work, we want to make sure that they're happening everywhere else. That's what we need to have happen. So thank you guys all so much for coming. Yes, well, before I finish that, thank you. What were you going to say? Well, I was going to say that.
And also, he wants to record people who
Oh, great.
support him.
Super.
Yeah.
So here's what I would say. thank you guys so much. You've already taken a big first step by actually showing up on a Saturday where there's other things to do, where there's delicious tacos a couple blocks away at the Modesto Taco Festival. Highly recommended. I really appreciate it. Ultimately, the only way that we make progress on any of these things, if I were to talk about, to characterize what we talked about today, it was really two sets of things. It was what can we do about, money and politics, and what can we actually do to solve some of our core democratic institutions? What can we do to fix what we're all frustrated about? And guess what? This is not just a theoretical discussion. We can all do something. We can get involved. There's an election in 32 days where we can make that voice known. We all have a vote, and I hope you all will vote on June 5th. Maybe not, the kids that aren't 18, but everybody that can vote should vote. But there is so much more you can do. We have one volunteer who has knocked on nearly 1,000 doors already. The entire city of Newman he has knocked on at least one time. There's a lot that can be done. We need your help. We need you telling your friends, coming to our events or our campuses, helping us knock on doors. And if you have money, give us money. We need that too. But more than anything, we just need your support and your power to make sure that we can get that message out there. Because once we do, we will win.